To my brother, Aaron, proof that dreams do come true if your dream is living in a closet with a hot plate. Melissa's voice rang out across the restaurant, her wine glass held high like a trophy. The entire table erupted in laughter. Her husband smirked into his napkin. Her friends exchanged knowing looks. I sat there with a smile plastered on my face, forcing myself to keep breathing normally. My hands gripped my whiskey glass so hard I thought it might shatter. The liquid burned going down, but not as much as the shame burning in my chest. 20 people watching, 20 people laughing, and my own sister leading the chorus. She leaned back in her chair, designer dress catching the light, diamond earrings sparkling. Everything about her screamed success. Everything about me, apparently, screamed failure. I kept smiling. I'd learned how to do that years ago. How to take the joke. How to be the punchline. How to let Melissa shine while I disappeared into the background. But something was different tonight. Something inside me finally cracked. The steak on my plate was probably expensive. I wouldn't know. I couldn't taste anything. I just pushed it around with my fork, watching the juices spread across the white porcelain. My jaw ached from clenching my teeth behind that fake smile. Melissa waved off the waiter like she owned the place. "We're fine for now," she said with the kind of authority that made people jump. She'd always had that gift, the ability to command a room without raising her voice. She turned back to me, and her expression softened into something worse than mockery. "Pity. Don't worry, Aaron," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand like I was a child. "Not everyone's meant for big things. Someone has to be ordinary, right? Otherwise, how would the rest of us know we're special?" Her friends laughed again, softer this time, more uncomfortable. But they still laughed. That was it. That was the moment I stopped being her little brother and became something else entirely. I walked home alone that night, through streets slick with rain. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, turning everything into a blur of gold and red. My shoes were soaked through. My jacket wasn't warm enough for October in Austin, but I barely noticed. Her laughter kept playing in my head like a broken record. That toast, that casual cruelty dressed up as sibling teasing. The way everyone had looked at me, not with sympathy, but with that horrible mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't them being humiliated. I stopped at the corner near my building and looked up at the third-floor window. My tiny, pathetic apartment that Melissa loved to mock. That's when I decided. She was going to learn what it meant to underestimate me. My sister mocked me for living in a tiny apartment. She had no idea what was coming next. My name is Aaron Reeves, and I'm 33 years old. To most people, I'm a maintenance supervisor for a small property management company in Austin. I fix leaky faucets, replace light bulbs, and unclog toilets. Not glamorous work, not the kind of thing you brag about at dinner parties. Melissa is my older sister by 5 years. She's always been the golden child. Prom queen in high school, valedictorian at graduation, full scholarship to a prestigious university. Every parent's dream daughter. I was the quiet one, the kid who preferred taking things apart to putting them back together. The one teachers forgot to call on because I never raised my hand. Invisible Aaron, some kids called me. Not in a mean way, just accurate. Our parents loved us both, I think. But Melissa was easier to love. She was shiny and bright and full of ambition. I was practical and careful and content with small things. At least, that's what everyone believed. When our parents died in a car accident 4 years ago, the lawyer read their will in an office that smelled like old books and furniture polish. Melissa sat across from me in a black dress, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. To our daughter Melissa, we leave our house and the majority of our savings, knowing she will use these resources to continue building the successful life we always knew she would have. Melissa sobbed harder. Whether from grief or satisfaction, I couldn't tell. To our son Aaron, we leave our love, our confidence in his abilities, and our belief that he will find his own path to success. That was it. Love and confidence. While Melissa got a fully paid-off house worth $400,000 and a savings account with another $150,000. She hugged me afterwards, mascara running down her face. "Don't worry, little brother," she whispered. "You'll land on your feet someday. You're resourceful." I nodded and smiled, and said all the right things. But inside, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't just land on my feet. I would build the ground she walked on. The apartment really was tiny. 320 square feet of peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and office. A bathroom the size of a closet. A kitchen that was literally just a hot plate, a mini fridge, and 2 feet of counter space. It sat above a Vietnamese deli that started cooking at 5 every morning, filling my apartment with the smell of fish sauce and lemongrass. The heater rattled like it was haunted. The pipes groaned at random hours. Sometimes I could hear my neighbors' conversations through the walls. But it was mine. $75 a month, utilities included. Cheap enough that I could save almost everything from my paychecks. While Melissa bought designer handbags and took European vacations, I bought books. Real estate investment guides, property law textbooks, building code manuals. I watched every YouTube video about property management, attended every free seminar, studied every successful investor strategy. I lived small so I could build big. The building's owner was an elderly man named Mr. Weaver. 78 years old, no children, no wife anymore. He owned 3 small apartment buildings scattered across East Austin. Nothing fancy, mostly low-income tenants paying month to month. He did his own maintenance because he couldn't afford to hire anyone. I started helping him about 6 months after I moved in, replacing washers and faucets, patching drywall, fixing broken locks. "You're good with your hands," he said one day, watching me rewire a light switch. "Most young people your age don't know which end of a screwdriver to hold." I shrugged. "My dad taught me." He said, "A man who can fix things never goes hungry." Mr. Weaver nodded slowly. "Smart man, your father." 3 months later, he sat me down in his apartment. "I'm tired, Aaron. Too much work for these old bones. Too many middle-of-the-night phone calls. Too many repairs I can't afford to pay someone else to do." He slid a folder across his coffee table. "I want to sell. All 3 buildings. You interested?" The price was low, suspiciously low, $250,000 for all 3 properties. Below market value by at least $100,000. But they needed work. A lot of work. "Why me?" I asked. Mr. Weaver smiled. "Because you remind me of myself at your age. Quiet, hardworking, not afraid to get your hands dirty. And because every tenant in these buildings likes you. That's worth more than money." I had $23,000 saved. Nowhere near enough for a down payment. Banks wouldn't touch me. I had no credit history, no assets, nothing to use as collateral. But Mr. Weaver offered to finance it himself. Pay me back over 20 years at 4% interest. Miss 3 payments in a row, the buildings revert to me. Fair. I should have been suspicious. I should have asked more questions. But sometimes opportunities don't knock twice. I signed the papers that afternoon. At 29 years old, I became a landlord. I didn't tell Melissa. I didn't tell anyone. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked my maintenance job during the day and managed the properties at night. Every spare dollar went into repairs and improvements. I learned plumbing by fixing burst pipes at 2 in the morning. I learned electrical work by rewiring apartments that hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Tenants moved out. Better tenants moved in. I raised rents slowly, carefully, making sure increases were justified by improvements. I learned which repairs to prioritize and which could wait. I learned how to negotiate with contractors and when to do work myself. Meanwhile, Melissa's life looked perfect from the outside. Big house in a nice neighborhood. Husband with a successful business consulting firm. Designer clothes, luxury cars, exotic vacations documented on social media. But I started noticing cracks. Her husband's firm lost a major client. Their mortgage payment increased when interest rates rose. Her shopping addiction was getting worse, the credit card debt obvious in the way she paid for things. She never asked how I was doing, never visited my apartment, just sent occasional texts reminding me about family dinners where she could show off her latest purchase. Everything changed 3 years after I bought the buildings. Mr. Weaver passed away peacefully in his sleep, and I discovered he'd forgiven the remaining balance on my loan in his will. $140,000 of debt gone. I owned the buildings free and clear. Within 6 months, I sold 2 of them for a combined profit of $320,000. I kept the third building, the one with my tiny apartment, and used the profit to buy 2 larger properties in better neighborhoods. I hired a real estate agent named Troy who understood my vision. Buy undervalued properties in gentrifying areas, improve them tastefully, raise rents gradually, and hold long-term, he said. You're doing everything right. By my 32nd birthday, I owned 5 buildings with 63 units total. My net worth on paper was close to $2 million. I still lived in the same tiny apartment above the Vietnamese deli. Still drove the same beat-up truck. Still wore clothes from thrift stores. Melissa still thought I was barely scraping by. The phone call came on a Tuesday night. Melissa's voice was different. Smaller. Scared. Aaron? Hey, it's me. I know we haven't talked much lately, but I need to ask you something. I waited. Do you know of any affordable apartments? We're in a bit of a tight spot financially. Just temporary. We're between houses. Between houses. The phrase rich people used when they couldn't afford their mortgage anymore. How affordable? I asked. Under $2,000 a month? Preferably under $1,500. Something decent. Not a dump. I pretended to think about it. Actually, I manage some properties downtown. I could probably find something for you. When do you need to move? As soon as possible. By the end of the month. I'll see what I can do. I hung up and opened my property management software. I had a perfect unit available. Unit 3B in my original building, right above my old apartment, the one I still lived in. The irony was too perfect to pass up. Melissa's application came through the official channels the next day. She used her maiden name, Melissa Reeves Harris, and her husband's income as the primary. But his income had dropped significantly. They barely qualified. She left a note at the bottom of the application. Priority processing would be appreciated. Family connection. I approved it immediately. Market rate rent, $1,450 a month. No special treatment. No family discount. She moved in 2 weeks later. I watched from my window as she directed the movers, her voice tight with stress. Designer furniture that belonged in a house twice the size. Boxes and boxes of clothes. A life downsized and crammed into 900 square feet. She didn't know I lived directly below her. I never told her where my apartment was, just that I lived downtown somewhere. The first time she called the maintenance line, I almost laughed. The water pressure is terrible. Can you send someone to fix it? I'll take a look, I said, keeping my voice professional. She didn't recognize me on the phone. For 3 months, I was just the maintenance guy. I fixed her leaky faucet, replaced a broken light switch, cleared a clogged drain. I wore a baseball cap and kept my head down. She barely looked at me, just pointed at problems and walked away. She complained constantly. The lobby smelled weird. The neighbors were too loud. The building was old and needed updating. Everything was beneath her. Can't you tell your boss to do something about this? She asked one day, gesturing vaguely at the hallway walls. This building is falling apart. I'll pass along your concerns, ma'am, I said. Ma'am, that's what I called her. She hated it. I could see in the way her jaw tightened. But she never connected the dots. Never recognized her little brother beneath the cap and maintenance uniform. Her life continued to unravel. Her husband's business collapsed completely. He started drinking. I could hear their arguments through the ceiling. Accusations, crying, slamming doors. She got a job in retail at a department store. I saw her once coming home in a uniform, her face exhausted and makeup-free. She looked 10 years older than at that dinner where she'd mocked me. Her friends stopped visiting. The expensive furniture got sold piece by piece. The designer clothes appeared on resale websites. She was drowning, and nobody was throwing her a rope. I felt something then. Not quite satisfaction. Not quite pity. Something in between. But I remember that toast. That casual cruelty. The way everyone had laughed. I kept waiting. Her birthday dinner was planned at the same restaurant where she'd humiliated me. She invited me via text. Family dinner for my birthday. 7 p.m. Friday. Try to dress nice. The question mark said everything. I showed up in my usual clothes. Jeans, button-up shirt from Target, work boots. She frowned when she saw me, but didn't say anything. There were only 6 people at the table this time. Her husband looked miserable. The The friends were different, cheaper clothes, forced smiles. The Golden Girls' circle had shrunk. She tried to recreate the old magic. The confident toast, the easy laughter, but it felt hollow now, desperate. To another year older and wiser, she said, raising her glass. And to family, who stick by us even when times are hard. She looked directly at me when she said it. Was that an apology? An acknowledgement? I raised my glass and said nothing. The rent check bounced 2 weeks later. First time in 3 months. I sent the standard late notice. No emotion. No personal message. Just policy. She called the office, furious. This is ridiculous. I need to talk to the property owner. I'll have the money next week, but I shouldn't have to pay a late fee. The office manager, a woman named Patricia I'd hired specifically for her no-nonsense attitude, transferred the call to me. This is Aaron Reeves, property owner. How can I help you? Silence. Long, painful silence. Aaron. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Melissa. I understand you're calling about your late rent payment. You own this building? I own several buildings. This is one of them. Your payment was due on the 1st. Today is the 16th. Late fees are outlined in your lease agreement. More silence. Then, why didn't you tell me? You never asked. She hung up. For 2 days, nothing. Then she showed up at the property office, demanding to see me. Patricia buzzed me. Your sister is here. She's pretty upset. Send her in. Melissa walked into my office looking like she'd been crying. Sunglasses, even though we were indoors. Designer bag from 3 years ago, fraying at the corners. She sat down without being asked. How long have you owned this building? 4 years. And you let me move in without telling me. You needed an affordable apartment. I had one available. What was I supposed to do? Her hand shook. You could have told me the truth. Like you told me the truth at that dinner? When you called my home a closet with a hot plate? When you said I'd never amount to anything? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I was joking, she said weakly. It was just sibling teasing. Was it? Because it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like you needed everyone at that table to know you were better than me. More successful. More important. And the only way to prove it was to humiliate me. Tears ran down her face, taking mascara with them. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was awful. But Aaron, I'm drowning here. My marriage is falling apart. I lost everything. Can't you give me a break? I pulled up her account on my computer. You're 3 months behind on rent. That's $4,350 including late fees. Your lease requires payment or vacating within 30 days of receiving final notice. You'd really evict your own sister? I met her eyes. You'd really mock your own brother for working hard and living within his means? She had no answer for that. The eviction notice went out the next morning. Official, legal, unavoidable. Melissa tried everything. She called our aunt, who told her she'd made her bed. She called old friends, who suddenly had their own financial problems. She even tried calling her husband, but he'd moved out 2 weeks earlier. Word spread through her social circle. The irony was too good not to share. Melissa Harris, who'd bragged about her perfect life, was being evicted by the little brother she'd mocked for being poor. The same people who'd laughed at her jokes now laughed at her situation. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't tell anyone who didn't need to know. But I also didn't stop the eviction. She moved out on a cold morning in February. I inspected the unit after she left. It was spotless. She cleaned every surface, fixed every small thing that was broken, even touched up paint on the walls. In the kitchen, she'd left a note on the counter. Just 2 words in her handwriting. You win. I stood there for a long time, holding that note, expecting to feel triumph, vindication, justice. Instead, I just felt tired. Winning hadn't made me feel better. It hadn't erased that dinner. It hadn't changed the past. It had just made me the person who evicted his sister. I renovated Unit 3B completely. New floors, new appliances, fresh paint in warm colors. I installed better lighting and updated the bathroom. Turned it from a desperate temporary home into a place someone would want to live. Every nail I hammered felt like closing a chapter. The unit rented in 3 days for $1,800 a month. Young professional couple, good credit, no drama. Meanwhile, Melissa disappeared from social media. No more posts about perfect meals or beautiful views. Just silence. I heard through my aunt that she'd moved in with a friend, was working 2 jobs, was trying to rebuild. Her husband had filed for divorce. I didn't reach out. Neither did she. 6 months later, a local real estate magazine did a feature on young property investors. They wanted to interview me, photograph my buildings, tell my story. From maintenance man to property mogul, how Aaron Reeves built an empire one apartment at a time. The article talked about my unconventional path, living in a tiny apartment to save money, learning skills by doing repairs myself, buying undervalued properties and improving them thoughtfully. They call me visionary, strategic, an example of the American dream done right. The magazine came out in September. My phone exploded with messages. Old friends congratulating me. Business opportunities. Interview requests. Melissa didn't call. I saw her in November. I was grabbing coffee downtown, and there she was, waiting tables in a busy cafe. White shirt, black apron, hair pulled back. She moved efficiently between tables, smiling at customers, completely professional. Our eyes met. She froze, tray of drinks shaking slightly in her hands. I could have left. Should have left. Instead, I sat down in her section. She came over slowly. "What can I get you?" "Coffee. Black. And whatever's good for breakfast." She nodded and walked away. Came back with coffee and a menu. Wouldn't meet my eyes. When I finished, I left a $100 bill on the table with a note on the receipt. Never underestimate quiet people. I didn't look back to see her reaction. I'm 33 now. I own 8 buildings with 106 units total. I have a property manager who handles day-to-day operations. I consult on real estate investments and mentor young people trying to break into the business. I still live modestly. Not in the tiny apartment anymore. I upgraded to a 2-bedroom in one of my nicer buildings. But I drive a practical car, buy my clothes on sale, cook most of my meals at home. The difference is choice. I live this way because I want to, not because I have to. People respect me now. They listen when I talk. They value my opinion. But I remember the guy who sat silent at that dinner table. The one everyone laughed at. The one his own sister called a failure. I remember him because he's still me, just with better accounts. Sometimes I drive past that restaurant. The one where Melissa made her toast. The chandeliers still sparkle through the windows. I can still hear the laughter if I think about it. But it doesn't hurt anymore. It's just a memory now. A moment that pushed me toward becoming someone I'm proud of. Melissa and I haven't spoken in a year. Maybe we never will. Maybe that toast broke something that can't be fixed. Or maybe someday she'll understand what I learned that night. That the size of your apartment doesn't measure the size of your dreams. That quiet people are often building things you can't see. That underestimating someone says more about you than it does about them. The tiny apartment she mocked wasn't small. It was a foundation. And foundations are meant to be built on. Sometimes the person you laughed at ends up owning the ground you walk on. Sometimes the joke's on you. Sometimes justice is just patience and hard work meeting opportunity. My name is Aaron Reeves. I'm 33 years old. I own the building, and I built it all from a closet with a hot plate.